Hi, I'm Gordy Gundaker. Welcome to the Dirt Parlor Podcast.
Hi, I'm Don Martin. Welcome to the Dirt Parlor. And this thing is big.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of the Dirt Parlor, brought to you by the fine folks at Nutrient Ag and Steve Martin, along with Jeff Hoker with Hoker Trucking, Bodies by Skinny, Checker Custom Screen Printing and Embroidery, and of course Reed Millard with Millard Family Chapels. Tonight we've got what a pioneer of our sport right here, the owner of Rocket Chassis, Mark Richards. And Mark, we appreciate you coming on here. I'm not as super thrilled, I had to watch you guys drive right on by the other night, so that part wasn't very fun for me, but we appreciate you hopping on here with us, and obviously a great weekend for you guys.
Yeah, it was. We've been getting better and better throughout the year. It's been a little bit of a struggle with getting Brandon back, and we've had a couple different drivers, good drivers, nothing bad, but Brandon's, obviously he needs something different than other drivers do. So we're starting to get real back into what he needs.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, it's tough. Obviously you're trying to do a lot of things, building your chassis, obviously you guys switched over to your 1.2. I know Brandon said the other night in his interview that you guys built a new piece, and like you said, changing drivers it can't be easy, right? We're all different. We're all probably a pain in the ass to deal with too, and so you're shuffling through all that. But one thing I think everybody knows in the pit area is we're not going to keep you guys down for long, and clearly you've now clipped off 2 in the last 2 weekends, on tour, and that confidence gets going and you start hitting on something. That's where the speed usually comes from.
Well, yeah, everybody's confidence gets up, the drivers, the crew, everybody. And, it just is a lot easier to build off of that than when things are down, because it seems like when, you're not winning, it's just, you're not working any less, you're working harder when you're not winning. So, everybody says they work harder when they're winning. I don't believe that. I think you work harder when you're not winning, if you're good in this sport.
Yeah.
The one thing, Mark, I wanted to ask you is the fact that when is it helped that Brandon, when he gets in his own car a little bit, and then you're not out there, you're at the shop and getting ready, and when the B5's out there running a little bit, that's got to be helping the program too, getting that feedback too from him as well. Does that help?
Well, he gets a chance to try things that it's hard for us to try sometimes, because, we just got to do what we think is the best at the time. And Brandon goes to them summer national races, not that he doesn't have to be good, but it gives him a chance to bounce around and try some things that we normally wouldn't try, or we've already tried it and either ruled it out or, just put it in the box and said, we're not going to do that. And that's basically one thing that happened here a couple of weeks ago was, at the beginning of the year, I felt like our car was racing with McCready at the end of last year, and the car was really pretty decent. I mean, the last race McCready drove, he led Eldora for the dirt track for 80 some laps and ended up second. And Brandon got in that car and we went to Florida, and it was, I don't know, it's kind of like you're starting over again, even though Brandon has been here, and we were trying to do what we'd done with Timmy, and what goes on with Timmy doesn't work so much for Brandon, and maybe the next guy it doesn't work for. So, Florida threw us off a little bit, and now we look back, we kind of got a real good grasp of why we were off so far in Florida. And it really wasn't the car. It was some of the things that we had, the setup portion of it, trying to get Brandon comfortable in that condition that's in Florida. That condition in Florida isn't the same as what it is at Wheatland Speedway, or isn't the same as what it is at Fairbury or somewhere like that. That is like racing on slime wide open, which usually has always been pretty good to us. But where we had the car at the end of the year, it wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. Well, and that's, obviously, the tell of like when you go to Florida, you kind of throw that notebook away and move on from it, as much as real as that is. But for you guys, when you're trying to readapt with getting Brandon back, you're trying to kind of minimize doing those big swings, I would say, throwing crazy stuff at the car, because you're really trying to get back to a baseline, I guess you'd kind of say, where everybody's comfortable. Maybe you're not ripping off wins, but you get to the point where you get some good finishes. But when you don't have that baseline, then you start taking those swings. You almost end up further out in left field before you really get going again.
You're 100% right. So,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what happens. We're in a different era. The tire situation isn't what it used to be. I don't feel like we have the grip that we used to have with tires. And, even though they're twos and threes and fours, they're not what the 20s and the 30s and the 40s was a few years ago. So, and I'm sure you felt that, Gordy, and it's definitely changed the direction that we got to look at as far as setup goes.
One of the things that you mentioned was the tire thing. And when the new tire came out, we always talk about it, Gordy and I, even when we had Jason Figure on, we talked about like all these rules changes seem to happen. Like, why do they happen during the season? You think if there's a new tire coming out or something, any rules that are going for like next year for 2026, it seems like those should be addressed about when the season's over, for everybody can kind of plan accordingly. Did this catch you by surprise too a little bit? I mean, I'm sure Mark Richards had some insight or something on it, but I'm curious to know what you thought about this tire situation when it first came out.
Well, it was coming, and I knew about it last year because, they built some of these tires similar to these, and there was a few guys raced them up in Pennsylvania last year, and it looked like that was the direction that was good. And I think it is good. I still think it's the right direction. When they made the tire rule back 3-4 years ago, when they came out with the national late model tire rule, it was put on a tire that I'm going to say was in the early 90s is when that tire was developed. And truthfully, along about 2010, 2012, they came out with the NRM tire. And that tire was a more up-to-date tire for what the cars needed. So when they made the tire rule a few years ago, they stuck with the tires from early 90s. And, whenever they got to race against another brand, which is American Racer, and there's tracks in Pennsylvania and there's tracks other parts of the country that they're allowing two companies to compete. Well, when American Racer brought their tire to the game, they brought an open tire. Hoosier brought basically the old UMP tire from the 90s, which they did that before they knew they were going to be in competition with American Racer, I believe. I believe that to be the direction that it went. Then they realized that, hey, we're going to have to compete against these tires at like Port Royal. You can run either or. And there's a lot of tracks in Pennsylvania that you can run either or. There's tracks in the South that you can run either or, American Racer or Hoosier. But they allowed American Racer to bring their version of the tire rule, which was an open tire. And the tire that we used to have, the NRM, was an open tire. Well, that tire does a lot to the car as far as the handling goes. But what I've seen here lately, I see I see some tire fail, some flats that I normally don't see. So I don't want to get too far into that because I don't know for a fact what's causing them, but we do see a lot of flats right now. Gordy, I'm sure you've probably seen them too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's crazy. I mean, obviously you guys have had a bunch. I feel like I've watched you guys have a bunch of right rear
We got more
failures.
flat tires than I've ever had.
Yeah. And that seems to be the reoccurring theme is a lot of right rear flats, which is super random. And it's never like that goes 30 laps and then it blows out. You see guys blow them out in hot laps. I know the last time we were at Burlington, I believe it was earlier this year, Chad Simpson blew one apart in hot laps, and then somebody blew one apart in qualifying, and then 6 laps into a feature somebody had one. So it's kind of a random thing that I've seen. I mean, I've been fortunate enough so far I haven't had one, knock on wood, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either, and it's kind of disheartening as a racer because you're almost going, man, am I next?
I think if you raced on the other part of the track, you would have them too.
Yeah, I guarantee it.
Don't take that the wrong way, but I mean, the fact is, Gordy uses the bottom a lot, and there isn't. I believe it's got something to do with banging that cushion.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, and I would say, even too, for me, like a lot of times I try not to circle out there as much and get to searching too far because I know that when them things seem to get some heat into them, they like to give up. That seems to be that theme. And I don't know if it's the cushion or if it's the wheel spin or what it may be, but that, the other night
it's definitely something.
Yeah. I moved up there to chase Brandon for a couple laps and knew I was like, I can't. Well, for one, I don't belong up there. But for two, I'm like, I'm not doing myself any favors, and I'm going to try to get back down off of here just because I felt like I was getting hot.
He didn't run it as much after he got the lead. Like, he did it to get around you because he kind of knew, the line you were going to run, and he had to get up on the wheel pretty hard, to get around you. But most of the race, he was back down unless he was in lap cars.
Yeah.
Mark, it's kind of funny. Gordy told me, he says, every time I'm winning a race that pays pretty good, it seems that Sheppard always wins it.
That's 3 of them now.
He said
we're
three.
At 3. He got me at Farmer City a couple of years ago. He got me at the Dome, and now he got me this time. I'm like, I texted him earlier today. I said, son, but you better either quit going to these races or let me get one so I can just be happy about one of these. God.
Mark, you may want to think about putting him in a car there for you.
Gosh, dang. I'm like, every time I'm leading a big race, I got Brandon Sheppard on my back door, and that's like the worst person in the world to have knocking on your door.
Well, there's one thing. Brandon's a clean driver, so you don't have to worry about too much there. I mean, he does an incredible job as far as, he doesn't very seldom have anybody at the truck yelling at us. So, he does a great job with that.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Obviously, Brandon and I grew up racing. We've known each other our entire lives, and heck, even at the Dome there this year, where there is absolutely no room to race at all, and we're battling for the lead, and we never hit once. And that's one thing I've always enjoyed about Brandon is even doesn't matter if he's in your ride, which is one of the absolute best rides you could ever be in. He doesn't just abuse that power to say, well, I got all these parts, I can just go tear them off. And that's the reason that everybody enjoys racing with him.
I'll tell you, when things are going good with Brandon and the car and everything's working, he hardly ever touches anything. I mean, we raced like 17, 18, 19, those years. We wouldn't even put a bumper on the car all year. I mean, he just was, he's just clean. And I mean, he doesn't do any dirty passes, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, and that's, one thing what I love about racing, like the other night, starting up front with all the best guys in the country is, although we're racing as absolute hard as we can, those guys, we're not really running over each other to pass each other and do those things. And that's one of the things that, I kind of bloated about the other night to a bunch of people after the race is like, man, you got to be frustrated you didn't win or, didn't run better. I'm like, listen, these guys are the absolute best in the country. And to be up there battling with them anyways is something, but to be up there racing hard and slicing through traffic and doing those things, like, you don't get to do that at a, with a lot of guys.
Well, the cost has gotten so high, the work has gotten to be too much, and guys just don't want to tear their equipment up, to win a race, because there's going to be another race. And, the theory that you're just going to tear it to the ground to win the race, it's just cost too much today to do that. So, that group you was racing with the other night, nobody really gets out of line with that group. And, you can pretty well trust what the guy's going to do, and throw you in there. You did a good job. I mean, Brandon knew where you were going to be, and it wasn't like you're going to come across the racetrack on him, because he was on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, one of the things for me, it's no different. It's like, for one, I don't have enough crew guys to be tearing my shit all to hell every night. I can promise you, like, we most times we're doing just good enough to get our tires ground up and the mud scraped to make it sure we can get back out there and make a couple changes.
Most of the guys in this pit area is getting to where they don't have enough crew guys to be doing that kind of, continual rebuild every day. So, it's a little bit of a respect thing, because, the driver don't want to come in there and put it on the crew that they got to work all night, because of a pass or a situation that they got put in that, the driver's trying to take care of the equipment today. Most drivers at this level.
Mark, you got a hell of a team. I mean, you really do. I mean, with Austin and Danny, and I know that the one thing I've always said, that when you go into pit area and you see Mark Richards racing, it's probably the best prepared team probably in the country.
I mean, well, these guys have been together for a long time, since 2017. The three of them have been together. Danny's been with me since 2014. Each one of them are really good at what they do, and this is what they want to do. And they're more like brothers than anything else. I come racing because of them. I mean, I'm getting to where, I've been doing this a long time, but these guys here,
not you.
These guys here, give me inspiration and keep me going, because that they show me they want to do it. And, that's a little bit of an issue with this sport today. We just don't have that many people that want to do what I did when I was their age. And, it was easy to find help, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It's getting harder and harder to be out here. There's a number of things that causes it. The schedule is one of them. And, the schedule, the more races you run, the more people's away from home and their family and all that. It just makes it harder to do. And, I've told Swally, you race people out. There's young guys out there that want to race every night, and I understand that. But the problem is you can't find enough help that wants to race every night and be on the road, which we're on the road 200 nights a year right now. And, we're only running about 80 races a year. But by the time you pull out of the shop, which most people don't, they think I just appear in Wheatland. I don't have a jet I fly in on. I left home, and it's going to be 5 weeks before I get home on this trip. By the time we left home to go to 34, by the time I get back home, it'll be 5 weeks that we'll be out. And finding guys that want to do that and do this every day and wake up in one of these trucks and be away from some have family and be away from family, it makes it hard. And it's one of the reasons that guys just, they stayed out here and did this for a period of time, and they look at like, man, I could live a lot easier life if I wasn't out here doing this. This is a tough life. And most people don't understand it. Gordy understands it because he's out there trying to do it. But most people don't, even the people in our sport don't understand it, because just getting there is not what we go through. We have to prepare that car and get it ready for the next race, and I kind of laugh because some of the people that puts the schedules together, I often say, I don't know if they don't know, if they look at the wrong size map, how far something is in between races. But it's gotten better. I will say it's gotten better than what it used to be. It was nothing for us to drive, 7, 8 hours in between races each night when I was running with the Outlaws, because I swore they didn't own a map. They just thought that it was in the next state, and but the next state was 6 hours away, to the other end of it. You go to Texas, it's a long way across it, so I don't know. It has gotten better with that aspect, and finding people that want to be out here and do this every day. I'm pretty fortunate that I got 3 guys that wants to do it, and I'm going to do it for a little while. So I'm getting a call. I got to get off here. I should have shut my notices off, but I don't know.
You're all good. We still got you.
I got you. We can still talk. It'll clear off here in a minute. I don't want to.
Yeah. Well,
that's just shut off here in a minute.
Even like even this weekend, that Thursday to Friday trip from Burlington to Wheatland, which most obviously you look at it on a map, but I mean for us it's like it was a 5-hour ride.
A 5-hour ride is a tough ride in the middle of the night.
Yeah. And especially Thursday, we obviously were kind of in a rush there, and it's like, man, you're going as fast as you can to go from the heat race to the feature, and then it's like, all right, well, hurry up and load up. Now you got to go 5 hours, and then we get there on Friday, and it's hotter than hell. And
when I was younger, I loved doing that, and I felt like that was something we could do better than everybody else, because we could load up quick and we could be on the road, and we had a plan. That most of the time, if it was 5 hours, I drove the whole way and let them guys sleep. Or, if it was going to be longer than that, I'd drive to such and such time, and then Dan would get sleep, and then he'd come up there and take over. And if it was 7 hours, we'd run 7 hours, and nobody complained. But it's not getting any easier the older we get to do this. But I used to enjoy it because I felt like that's what we were good at, and when Scott was running with the Outlaws, there was one thing he hated, because, we'd be loaded up and out the gate, and they'd be standing there with everything unloaded looking at us, because we were going to mow up the road so we could be ready to go the next morning, get up and get the car ready. And, here they'd come dragging in 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, because they stayed there, and whatever they did, they stayed there and they left the next morning. I mean, we were there working the next morning, and I felt like that's what made us strong back then. I really like that kind of racing. Sometimes I don't like being at the same place for very many days, because the days get long when you're there, and you get up. We don't usually get moving until 10 o'clock just because of the late night. That's what time we're starting. If we get up any earlier than that, we got all of our work done by noon, and then we got 6, 7 hours, before we hot lap. So, what do? I mean, you can't go to the amusement park. You can't go hang out somewhere, because you've got to be at the racetrack. I mean, so we've changed our schedule around from what it used to be. I used to start a lot earlier, but now, unless we've really got a lot of work to do, we start at 10, and usually by 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the guys got everything ready to roll.
Well, and that's those long days, they take it out of you. That's one of the things that I don't think people quite understand. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot of fun, and it's great to work on these race cars and do all those things, but when you got to do it consecutive days, and next thing you know, you're sitting out there in the sun for 8, 9 hours all day, and then you're racing all night, like your guys are beat by the end of the night, and that's like, hey, we got to wake up tomorrow and do all this again. And keeping everybody motivated is probably one of the hardest parts. It helps when you're running good, but those nights when you tear up something or whatever it is, it's like, man, we got to wake up and do this all day tomorrow. I mean, I know Friday at Wheatland, we didn't hot lap till 7, didn't hot lap till 7 Saturday, and those days just drag out forever.
Well, I understand totally.
You know, one of the things too that I've always been impressed with you, Mark, is the fact of how the evolution of the race car, how you've been able to keep up from the wedge all the way to where we are today, and how it's drastically changed, but yet you've managed to still pretty much stay on top of things. And because, you know, I still remember that, like, when Scott, we all know that when you went to the longer races, your car, your car just had to be there. And Scott was so good about managing his tires at some of the bigger races. And now it's like they're going as hard as they can go right out of the gate.
It's changed. So, you know, Scott used to beat everybody because he managed his tires and he used the tires. Truthfully, that doesn't work today the way it did back then. Now you got to go as hard as you can go every lap. And, you know, Scott was a finesse driver. Billy was a finesse driver, as far as I'm concerned. Those two guys, you never seen them mowing the cushion down, burning the way you win races today. You never seen them guys win those races that way. And racing has evolved over the years. You know, I started in the 70s, and, you know, actually before the wedge cars started, you know, I was building cars at a young age back then, and we were using, you know, like Camaro body cars, and it was a whole different way of building cars. But the way you raced back then was totally different. Then when the wedge cars came along, that was a different way. And then, you know, Scott and Billy's era, I feel like they changed the way you race, and you had to be smooth and finesse and all that. And I feel like, and I don't want to make it sound this way, sound the wrong way, I feel like Josh changed started the wave of the hard driving. And, you know, he really started in 2004. And, you know, Billy and Scott I know there was a lot of nights that Scott would be mad because Josh just drove the piss out of it. And, you know, Scott would say, well, that car ain't that good. He just drove the piss out of it. Well, today, that's what we're up against. I mean, everybody's driving the piss out of their cars. And, you know, the finesse parts, Scott's era and Billy's era, they were together, I feel like. And there were some other guys in there. Dale McDowell was kind of in that, and he's adapted a little bit to this new era, but he'll tell you he doesn't like the way that you have to race today. And you know, it's, I think, Don, you talked to me earlier about it. I think it's in the sprint car world too. I think the sprint car world has went the same way the late model world has went. And, you know, these younger guys have found success by just driving the balls off the car. And our races are way shorter than people thinks they are. You know, 50 laps ain't that long. You know, like the other night, Gordy, I mean, that ain't a very long race, 50 laps. Yeah. And when Scott and Billy's success was going on, those were 100-lap races. And what Scott and Billy would do back in those days is they'd let them young guys that were driving the piss out of them go, and at the end of the race, they'd drive by them, you know, because they had more tire, and their finesse type driving at the end of the race won the race. But today, you throw finesse out the window. You just drive the piss out of it. I mean, truthfully, Jonathan probably drives one of the best finesse drivers today, I feel like, that's out there. And he used to be that guy that was, you know, hammering on it, banging and tearing the cushion down. But you watch Jonathan today, he doesn't drive like that. He drives more like Scott or Billy, and he wins his share that way. But there's a lot of nights that I think that the balls to the wall type deal and the 40 lap, 50 lap event, it's 100 lap. Jonathan Davenport, he shines in 100 lap races, is where he shines the most. And it's because I feel like he takes care of his stuff the way Scott and Billy used to.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, and I'm sure obviously you go to as many racetracks as anybody else does throughout the year. I feel like a lot now of the racetracks they really want that, right? They want those big cushions and that hammer down style. And
I'm not going to say, but there's a promoter told me, he said, if they ain't up there burning the cushion, my fans don't like it. And he said, that's why we're going to have a cushion. And the fans love it. And I understand it because look, I can remember races years ago that would be so slick you didn't even know the green was out. You thought the caution was out because you couldn't hear the engines run. One of the biggest misconceptions that people have in this sport that guys are driving wide open every lap. And Gordy, you're a driver. They don't realize that you sometimes may not even be using a quarter throttle. And I got people that buy these cars and they think that everybody beating them is running wide open. And, I'm like, no, they're not. And I'll say, Brandon, tell me how much throttle you're using. Maybe quarter throttle, maybe half at the most. You just, people don't realize that you're not like if the racetrack's 14 seconds when you qualified, and now it's 18 or 19 seconds when you run the feature. Now, how much throttle can you be using?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's I feel like obviously you go to some racetracks across the country and you listen to guys and the way they drive, and you see the guy that maybe goes out there in a heat race that runs wide open and it's kind of fast and they stay up front, and then as soon as the racetrack slows down,
that guy's still running. Yeah,
they can't.
He's still running wide open. No. Yeah.
They don't realize that the guys that know how to do this today that are winning races may only be using half throttle, quarter throttle. You don't get wide open because you can't.
No, not at all. Not at all. And especially now, right, we've got these motors that make all this power, and they do that so that we can run around there fast early. But come later in the night, there's a reason a lot of guys are running restrictors and smaller carburetors and all those things to dial some of that back. I mean, Wheatland is probably one of the biggest deals of that, of not being able to use a lot of throttle throughout the feature because, it's a slick and patchy and kind of goofy place. And, you'll end up in no man's land in a hurry if you're on the gas too much.
How much fuel was you using the other night? Half throttle?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, if I got Wheatland.
Yeah.
Now, I felt like our car was good after the heat race, even though we ran second. And I didn't use any restrictor, and I didn't use any small carburetor, nothing. I didn't use anything. And the crew chief Dan said, how much you want to kill it? I said, I don't want to kill it. I think our car's too good tonight. So we was full throttle at Wheatland, and not saying he was using all of it, but he had it there if he needed it.
Yeah.
So, it's whether the driver can handle it, how much the driver, understands how much to pedal the car. And you can, like, early, I kind of felt like we needed to go and we needed to use all the motor.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I didn't either. To be honest, I used to run restrictors quite a bit, and I kind of got away from it, I'd say maybe 2 years ago, just because I think I really enjoy the feel. I run Willie's Carburetor Super Bowl stuff, and I feel like it runs really well. And I've the newest deal that he's built, I feel like runs great from the minute you hot lap to the time the feature slows way down, and it's super smooth, and I like having that throttle there if I need it, because if the racetrack changes and you need to get up and get after a little bit, like, you need to be able to have it, because it's very easy to get yourself in a bad spot if you kill too much motor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Go ahead. Mark, you got a favorite era that when you raced in? Is there a particular era that you really thought, like the cars, the drivers? What was your favorite era of racing?
I'm going to say a lot of people thinks today is really the best era. And and I've been through a lot of eras. It was through
I
the
know.
70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. I'm going to say the best era was the early 2000s into 2000 teens. That was really the best era because the problem with this sport today, it was it was way simpler then. And the problem is we've got this to where it's so complicated now that we're scaring people away that possibly would like to do this, but we're making them believe that it's too complicated. And, between engineers and shock specialists and all this stuff that you have to have today, people looks at it like, well, I can't compete with them guys. Back then, in the early 2000s to say 2000 early teens, you could go to any chassis builder and they could hand you a set of shocks and springs or a set of shocks, give you the springs in a box, give you a tape measure and tell you where to put the nut. And everybody raced. When the spring smashers came along, the shock dynos came along, all this stuff came along. The problem is anytime you have that type of technology, then you have to up the people that is reading that technology. And we have made the sport a little out of reach for the average guy. And it's the reason local tracks are hurting. Nobody wants to hear this, but the more money we pay, the more money people spend. And, it's kind of like trying to spend more money to get that big prize. And that's the problem with this sport today. In the 2000 era up to the early teens, it wasn't like that. And you could go to GRT and buy a car, and they had a package that you could take that car and race it. You didn't have to have an overly great crew chief. You didn't have to have a shock engineer. You didn't have to have a chassis engineer. You didn't have to have all the stuff that it takes today to be competitive. That's what's changed, Don. And I kind of know when it happened. And, we had to get on board with it. And I had to change my way of thinking of what we used to do back in those days. And that's when Scott and Billy was having their success. And Scott and Billy, they didn't have shock engineers. They didn't have chassis engineers. They were crew chiefing them cars out of the seat. And if anybody believes they weren't, they're crazy, because Scott and Billy, I was around them too much, raced with them too often. Those guys were crew chiefs in the seat. And it didn't matter what help was with them. They were successful all the time, because they were real racers. And when I make that statement, I mean, it's the truth. I've been around a lot of people over the years, different racers. And those two guys, crew chief from the seat of them cars.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to put a price on a guy that can get out of the seat and tell you exactly what he felt and know where his car was messing up or understand why it was messing up as well, and narrow that down. We don't have many of those, I would say, in these days. You don't have a lot of guys that are in the I don't want to say they're not in the shop, but they're not the guys that are working on everything and know every piece to it or know why this does this or why that.
I've tested with a lot of people over the years, and a lot of good drivers. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not going to say who, but the best guy I've ever tested with, that guy could get out of the car, tell you where the problem was, and you work on it, and you were going to be better. I promise you. And not saying anything bad about anybody else. I'm just saying that guy learned from the era of Scott and Billy. And, today's drivers, there's just way more stuff going on than what them guys had going on back in those days. I don't want to say distractions, but there was way more stuff going on today that takes the driver out of that part of it to where he's hands-on in that shop, sleeping under that car, learning that car. And Scott would tell me all the time, he always felt like he was a piece of that car because he can analyze that part of the car by what he felt. And that's the way Scott went about it. And, I don't know many guys like that today.
Yeah. They're few and far between anymore. That's for sure.
Mark, I remember once being with Scott at Batesville, Arkansas at the Topless. And when they had, remember the 20, on Friday night, you had the, like the heat races, remember that were like 20, 25 laps. They were like features, And I remember when the races were over, Hummel, Dwayne was racing at that period of time. And I remember Scott brought Dwayne into the hauler and showed Dwayne and I both. He said, "Hey, I want you to look at this. I want you to look at my right rear." And I'll never forget it still to this day. And the tips were still on his right rear when he showed me and Dwayne. And he looked right at me and Dwayne both. He says, "You don't think these guys are in for an ass whooping tomorrow?" That was the one. I mean, I'll never forget that still this day, because I was like, "Oh, that's a new tire." He goes, "That's what I just ran 25 laps on, and I won that heat race." So you can imagine what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, Scott's confidence was good because he knew how good he was, and he knew where the other people kind of stood against him. And, Dale McDowell's a lot like that. Dale's one of the guys that, I got a lot of respect for. And Dale's one of those guys that I feel like when Dale gets in that car, he analyzes that car as good, if not better, than anybody can today. And he always did over the years. He's really, I think he fits in that era with Scott and Billy, even though that he's still racing today, and has had success. But Dale's definitely one of the guys that was, I always had respect for, because Dale he drove that finesse type of race that those guys drove.
It's amazing to see that him and Shane, after they're still going on and on. It's actually what a relationship between two brothers. I mean, you got to.
Oh yeah, they were close
to
the
both
whole time. I mean, I raced with them for a number of years. They had our cars, and we traveled up and down the road together. And they definitely were a close brotherhood there between those two. And Dale could rely on Shane, and Shane could rely on Dale, and they had a really great relationship throughout the years.
Now answer me this: Do you? I mean, obviously, I don't think it's going to, but the days we're talking about, right, where all this technology, like, it's just obviously going to keep evolving, right? Is it? You see it from a chassis building side. Is there a way to fix it? Is there a way to slow it down? Is there, what is your opinion on that? Because, I mean, I know where I stand on it. I don't see it ever slowing down. I hate to say that because it just seems like now we just keep bringing more and more
technology.
Anytime, more rules won't fix it. The rules won't fix it. We've proven that. We had rules that we can't even police. And, when you make a rule, then an engineer looks at it like, okay, how do we get around the rule? Well, then not everybody can figure that out, so I almost think we got to a point we have too many rules. We have rules that are bullshit rules, and, that don't mean anything. That racing could be better if we didn't have some of these rules. And I was always led to believe that, we need a rule book. But I don't know. Today's world, when you got a box and this is the way the box is built, then some engineer comes in and refines the box. And, you know, I've got that. I mean, I've got access to two great engineers that I use, and they're really smart guys. And, you know, they can figure things out to get around what the average guy can't. And what I'm saying with that is not everybody has that access. And, you know, we pass it on to our customer, but it just makes me look at the sport and say, you know, are we headed down the right road? Because if you look at where we're a version of NASCAR. And
Yes.
in the early 2000s, I was down there in that NASCAR world quite a bit. You know, I ran around with Tony a lot, and you know, Josh was down there trying to make it a 2010 era, 2011, 12. And the small teams got pushed out because the big teams could hire the better engineers and more of them. And when they had 3-car teams and 4-car teams, well, those 2 and 3 and 4-car teams could do more than that 1-car team could do, because, you know, they could have 3 or 4 times as many engineers. And, you know, there was more people working on the problem or working around the rule. And I think we right now, and if you'd asked me this a year ago, I wouldn't have told you my opinion, what I think right now. But what I think right now is that we need some backyard ingenuity in these cars again. You know what I mean? To where you can do some things to try to find some speed. And right now, the only way we can find speed is with some engineer that's looking at the rule and trying to figure a way around it. And you know, the tech thing, I don't know. I don't want to make this sound the wrong way, but you know, I see this post-race tech, and Gordy, you correct me if I'm wrong. Have you ever seen anybody illegal in a post-race tech?
No. No.
That's my point.
Haven't yet.
You can't tell me that all these years that somebody hasn't been illegal.
Yeah. I 100% agree. That's
So
the biggest.
I don't
biggest thing
know.
they come across
I don't
is
know why. I don't know why.
Yeah.
You know, I think the rule book needs to be opened up, and if it's something that we're not checking, it needs to be thrown out. You know, that needs to be gone. If we're not going to check for it, it needs to be gone. And I don't want to make it sound the wrong way, but I go to some of these big races and you see this dog and pony show of the rules, and we got tech line, and you know, we're going down through here and we're checking all this shit. Well, we're there for 4 days. You think that stuff don't grow? You think this thing don't? You think shit doesn't change? I mean, if you know what the rule has to be when you get there, well, you're going to be legal. So really, the tech line needs to be after the race, and nobody wants to throw the winner out. That's, you know, it's kind of
I think you just said it. You just said it.
it's kind of a problem that you know, you don't want to throw the winner out, but yet we need to have tech. And the waste of time of teching these cars before the race in a 3 or 4 day event, that's a waste of time, because if you tech on Wednesday, by Saturday, there's a lot of shit that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, I feel like like you just said, the tech of what we do, you know, what they're teching, the body templates, and we got to check the quarter panel measurements. I just, to me, it doesn't, you know, that stuff is, you're talking about something that you could take a 1/4-inch bolt out of and change it within a matter of seconds. You know, like what are we
really
them body straps got adjustments on them.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, when them cars get back to the truck after tech, I've seen it. I mean, it's not like it's this bullshit. I've seen it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I've seen cars on TV recently. I'm not going to say when, but I've seen cars on streaming recently that I know from watching them, there's no way they're legal by the rules that were we live by supposedly when we have a tech line, there's no way they're legal.
I know it.
So I don't know. I don't know. I guess we're doing the best we can do with what's out there as far as technology and getting people involved that are smarter. I mean, Don, I believe that the era of racing was better before all this.
I mean, I'm not trying to cut you off, but we go back and watch on Flow 24/7. You watch these old races. The one that keeps popping up is the year that Scott drove from the back of at Eldora, right, with the window net. And you watch that race for the lead at one point in there. For one, these guys, I know K-Rob was a part of it, and Jimmy Mars was a part of it, Dale McDowell was a part of it, and these guys are all over the racetrack, kind of sliding around, and you watch them, the noses aren't buried into the ground, and the decks aren't beat out of them.
Watch the 2006 World 100. That's the best World 100.
2006.
Yeah, 2006 World 100. That was by far the best World 100. And those cars back then were just like you said. They weren't sealed up to the ground. The guys were sliding all over. And it was Jeep, Bab, Earl, and Josh was the ones that was putting the show on. And Josh was just a kid. He'd only been racing for 2 years. And if he would have knew what to do, he passed them all in the bottom, and he passed Earl and Earl. And once you show him the bottom, you know where he's going. And Josh got out of the bottom after he got to the lead, and Earl got by him. And I think he ran third or fourth. Josh did. But it was Bab, Jeep, and that was when racing wasn't locked down like it is now. And what we got right now is cars that are locked to the ground. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer. It's just the era that we're in, and who knows what the era will be 5 years from now.
The bodies just look, I mean, they're so miscued, they're twisted and stuff. It's like air dependent like that.
There's a lot of people that won't agree with me, but it's side force is what we're racing against. And what we need is downforce. We don't need side force. The problem with side force is you're screwing the air up for the cars that's following you. So because the cars run in such yaw today, the yaw meaning that the back end is out, the body looks twisted. It's not really the body twisted. It's the suspension that's making that car look like that. And instead of taking up a path of air the width of the car, it takes up a path of the air more than the length of the car. Because now that car is in such a yaw motion, it's sort of like this box, okay? This box is coming at you this way. Now when this box is coming at you this way, it takes up way more air. So not only is it the air that the car's taking up, but it's the air that's protruding past the car. So if you're on the outside of somebody today, and that car, and let's just say there is a lane out there, there's bad air out there, unless the racetrack is as wide as Eldora and you got a bottom and a top. And the problem is we're depending on air because now we've turned into side force racers. And that is where I see the issue is. You want to make these cars race better? Straighten up the bodies, straighten up the droop, straighten up and make the cars square again. All you got to do is go back and watch them races back with Scott and Billy and those guys in the early 2000s. They could race side by side. They could race door handle to door handle. You ain't racing door handle to door handle today. I don't care where it's at. I mean, when Brandon passed you, Gordy, he had to have the whole top to get by you. You know what I'm saying? He didn't race down against your door because it's just the way it is today. There's such bad air that look, it's not the deal where you lift the nose up and that kind of dirty air. It's just when you lose side force, you're not stuck as hard. Side force is what's created all this.
Yeah. Well, we had JD on earlier this year, right after Eldora. And one of the questions that I asked him was, what's the difference when you're out front at Eldora compared to what you're like when you're racing, when you're running 10th? And he said it's a completely different feeling. There is no air. It's all bad air at that point. He said when you get to lap cars, it's as soon as you get within a straightaway of them, he said you start.
You'll slow up. You'll slow up 4/10 when you come up on a lap car.
Yeah.
Because the air is dirty. And that dirty air, that car doesn't have as much side force.
Well, I think if for people watching at home that maybe don't know what they're really looking at, if you watch it doesn't even really matter anymore if you're at a quarter mile or a half mile, that air is so dependent that if you watch a guy that goes in 3 car lengths in front of somebody and he might be a lane lower, watch what happens to the car that's out in that further out lane, and watch how bad all of a sudden that car is tight now turning left because that air is now pushed the left side of his car to a point because all that air is now packed against him. And it's as drivers, it's really tough because you're having to judge the air so constantly. If you're not paying attention, you put yourself in a really vulnerable spot pretty quickly. And don't get me wrong, there are times that the racing ends up great, right? All of a sudden you look at it like, wow, that race was awesome. Well, it's really because the air was so bad for one guy that the next guy that was further back, happened to get a good run based off of that. And to me, I don't think that's good racing. As a racer, I don't enjoy that because you have to work so much harder just to get one spot, because if your car has to be perfect in a sense and has to be able to maneuver all those things.
I agree 100%. I mean, I don't know that there's an answer. I don't know if there's ever going to be a fix. But there's people out there believe that we don't have a problem, but we do have a problem.
Yeah.
I would 100% agree. I mean, I think back to it, I grew up, I didn't race in in that era. I got to grow up with Dad watching all those great races at Volusia in the late 90s that were just spectacular and slick and sliding all over and those things. And we do not do that at Volusia anymore.
You don't do it hardly anywhere anymore. No. I mean,
right.
Some guys may feel like they're sliding all over, but somebody's out there rolling, you know what I mean, in clean air. And if you're back there in 10th, you probably feel like you're sliding all over the place. But, just like the other night, I knew when Brandon got in clean air that he was going to make time and roll. And it's just, I don't know. I guess that's where we are today.
I agree.
I'm surprised, like people like you I mean, you're a major influence. I mean, everybody respects you. So, I mean, why would we not have something to where people can't get together here and figure this thing out to put a board together, a Rigsby, a Richards,
there's too many opinions, and I got an opinion. The next guy's got an opinion. Everybody has an opinion.
Mark's just a chassis builder, and he wants to make his cars best, so he's going to do whatever is best for him. I don't buy
I'd like to see the sport to be better. I mean, look, we still sell cars. It's not like we don't sell cars, contrary to what people wants to believe. We still sell cars, but we're not going to have anybody to sell to if we don't get this sport where more people can be competitive and want to do it.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Overstating the fact of technology this and technology that, we're scaring people out of the sport. We're making people believe that it's too hard to do. Dirty air. We're talking about dirty air. We're talking about some kid that's racing at some local track that wants to be Jonathan Davenport someday, but he may not ever get the chance because either his dad or the guy he's driving for just says, hey, I'm over all this shit. You got to have all this stuff to race. let's figure out something else to do. And that's what the sad part is today. Some of the people don't get it, and they believe everything's great. Everything is great at this level. But tell me where it is at the next level or the next level below that, which is your dad's track at Tri-City Speedway. How is it on a weekly show with late models? You know,
They had 10 on Friday night.
okay, that's what I'm saying. And there's a lot of tracks that don't even have late models anymore weekly. You know, they only have them on special events. And there's some tracks that have pushed them out the door completely because
That's
they
right.
can't get enough cars. And in order for this sport to be healthy, that part of the sport has to be as good as the top level of the sport. You know, all the streaming and all this stuff, Rigsby and I are great friends. And Rigsby knows that I tell him this all the time. Whenever the streaming started, about 18 years ago is when it started, I told him then, I said, it's going to ruin the sport. Well, I was wrong partially. It never ruined the upper end of the sport. It excelled the upper end of the sport. The upper end of the sport has thrived from it. But what we've done now is we've killed the grassroots part of it. The part that where guys like Brandon Sheppard came from, you know, guys like today's guys, the younger guys today, I don't want to make it sound the wrong way, but they didn't race local. You know, there's not very many guys racing today, young guys, that race very much local. You know, they race maybe a crate car or something. The next thing you know, they're out here on the road racing with the Outlaws or racing with Lucas. Where back in the day, there was local heroes. And those local heroes were guys like your dad. He raced local. You know, Kevin did. Guys like Randy Cordy, guys like that around that area, Ed Dixon, guys like that. I can name off in different parts of the country. You know, you go up in the Hagerstown area, there was guys like Gary Stuhler, Nathan Derber, Rodney Franklin. You go different parts of the country, there was different heroes. There's no heroes no more. Because now a guy is automatically out there running some national tour or regional tour, and he doesn't build that local following, so that local racetrack doesn't get the benefit of that guy drawing fans to the track. I mean, now we've educated people with this streaming. We've made people national fans, and the local promoters don't want to certain.
No, you're absolutely right.
We had a show, Mark, and it was dedicated to streaming, and we had one of our sponsors, Jeff Hoker, on. You know, who's not only a sponsor, is also a promoter, and you know, and there was some big debates out there of where it's going. You know, you know, what's crazy is I look at it now as like, for me, I can remember just getting in my car to work on Friday, man, looking at it. I didn't look at the weather forecast, man. I just went where I wanted to go because it was either that or you just didn't see it. You know. And
well, that's
now
what's
today,
changed.
Yeah.
That's what's changed.
Now you look at it, and everybody's looking at the weather like, hey, if there's any chance of weather whatsoever, or if it's hot or whatever, I'm staying at home and watching it. You know, I'll pay my $150 or $200 a year for it. And you know, I had this discussion actually with Bob Baker at the Hall of Fame of Knoxville, and I was there for the World of Outlaws show a few weeks ago. And Bob Baker's there every Saturday night at Knoxville. And I said to him or something like the week before the Outlaws were there, and they had a huge car count, you know, because you're getting into June, guys are starting to look at the nationals and stuff. And I said something like, "Wow, what a great field of cars you had even last weekend." And he looked at me and he goes, "There was nobody here. Even our local fans are not showing up at the weekly races because they're watching it at home."
Yeah.
He goes, "Now they'll come out for the Outlaws when they're here. You know, we'll have a good crowd this weekend." But he goes, "The weekly racing, it's really hurt us."
Yeah.
I was at a a really famous track this year. I'm just going to say that. I feel like I don't want to call it out, but the promoter and I was talking the day before the race. We pulled in there early, and I said, "How's your crowds?" He said, "Look, he said, I'm down to where I may have 150 to 400 people in the stands." I mean, you can't race a racetrack with 150, 400 people in the stands at a nice facility. I feel like one of the more famous racetracks in the country for, I'm just going to say, for a lot of cars in the pits. I said, "How many cars you got in the pits?" He says, "Well, I got cars," but he said, "I can't get people." And he was getting like 120, 130 cars in the pits. And, that just proves to you, because I always thought the cars brought the people, and they did before the streaming came along. But now the cars ain't even bringing the people. So when the promoters get to where they can't afford this, we're looking at something that we're going to be limited to the venues that we can go to. And I think that we're going to look more like NASCAR. And I don't really think that's the right direction that we need to be with this sport, to where the top level teams have out-resourced everybody. And look, Don, you know how long I've been doing this. And, we've built over 6,500 cars at Rocket. And before that, I probably built another, I'm going to say 1,500 at WRC and at my brother's shop. So, I'm looking, probably somewhere around 7,500, 8,000 cars that I've been involved with over the years. There's not that kind of market out there today. That market is not there. And it's not there because we have, I don't know, made it too hard to reach for the average guy.
Yep.
Well, Mark, we had John Gill on, and he brought something up to Gordy and I. He was like, "Man, when I was a kid," he goes, "dude, every garage had a race car."
Yeah.
Exactly.
You drove around, man. He goes, "That's where my interest came from."
There was 10 guys hanging out in that race garage.
Yep.
I guarantee you, Gordy, you guys work on your cars. How many people's hanging out?
None.
None.
None. No.
Listen, this is no joke. I used to, like, back 30 years ago, okay, we'll say in the 90s, we never worked on our race car in the daytime because we had too many cars to build. So we worked on our cars in the evening. And there was a group of guys that Timmy Hitton was driving at that time. You remember, Don?
Oh,
Timmy Hitton. And there was a group of guys that would come in the evening to work on that car. And I worked a couple, I don't know, it was the week after Lernerville. And I stayed at the shop and worked. I never seen one soul. in 2 days, Saturday or Sunday, my guys were off, and I stayed there and worked and put the motor and stuff in this new car that we built right before we went to Atomic. And I never seen a soul for 2 days. And that's the difference today is I think there's an interest level that's not there like it used to be. There's too many things for people to do. And look, there's not that many young people that's coming along that wants to be in that shop all day Saturday and all day Sunday, but you take 30 years ago, I'd have had 15 people there throughout the weekend, but it's changed. So whatever it is, it is.
I can remember growing up at my dad's shop in St. Charles. It was kind of in the middle of a town. I guess you'd say it was behind an old bowling alley. And I remember being 7, 8 years old in there hanging out. And just like you said, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, there'd be 12, 15 people in there checking everything out, looking at it, doing whatever, and it was Dad used to go racing. You never know who was going racing with him, but there was 5 people going racing with us every weekend. Excited to go and just be there and do whatever. And obviously, you know, a lot of that changed because of I would say the knowledge you have to even work on these cars now. Like you know, there's a lot that goes into them, but there's not many younger guys out there that are willing to maybe put as much time, I guess you'd say, into to learn this stuff, because it's like, well, I can just go do something else. It's way less work. And, you know, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of crazy how that disparity changed. And it really, I feel like you said, it's the last 10 years, it really took a way bigger downturn.
2015.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, you got it narrowed down.
Yeah.
Mark's like got that look like I know exactly what happened.
2015 is when time changed.
Yeah.
That's when I feel like the era changed.
Yeah.
And look, we've won a lot of races since 2015. You know, 19 was probably one of our most successful years with Brandon, and we won every 100,000 to win race that year there was, plus the championship and all that stuff. And you know, today, Gordy, and I don't want to make this sound the wrong way, but Brandon won 840,000 in 2019. Okay, we only raced like 70 times. So if you average that out per race, you know, what's it come out to, 12 or 13,000 a race? And our cost wasn't as bad as what it is today. Today, if you race 100 races, how many guys wins $1 million? You know, and that's 10,000 a race.
Right.
So the cost today is more, and really, I know we're running for bigger purses, but to win $1 million today, I did it with Hudson in 23. We won a little over $1 million. There was 3 cars that year that did it. Believe me, we had a way better year financially in 19, winning 840,000 because we only ran 70 races. You know, so I think part of the problem is we've emphasized too much on paying too much, and that's created the problem of spending too much. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I had this conversation this weekend. We were looking at the payout from Friday and Saturday, and I'm not knocking Lucas Oil or Wheatland or any of these guys for it, but Friday night paid $15,000 to win. Saturday paid $25,000 to win. It paid $4,000 to run fourth on Friday. It paid $4,000 to run fourth on Saturday for $10,000 more to win. And to me, right, I think you know it, right? $15,000 is more. I don't want to say it's more than enough, but it is more than enough for a winner's share in a sense. And those guys, you know, like a guy like me, right? Like I was happier in hell to run 7th the other night, and I made $2,500. The guy that ran, 14th made $1,500, and from there on back that paid $1,500. And to me, the purse structure and all these things is throwing it all off, and it's like we're glorifying winning these races, but it just costs the guy that run 12th just as much money to get there. And
we're in a performance type of sport, so you're always going to have the guys that are the winners, quote, whatever. They're going to be the guys that get the bigger prize. I understand how that works, but I think we kind of what my point is, we have brought more money into the sport for teams to, I guess, be ahead of the other teams. And it makes it tough because now you got to spend so much money in order to be competitive. I'm over $700,000 a year to run this team. Okay. When we win, 700,000, people are like, well, you broke even. No, I get 50% of the money. The other 50% goes to the driver and the crew. So if I win 700,000 and it costs me 700,000, I'm only getting 350,000. So if 350,000 we're behind, I got to win 1.4 million for this thing to break even from the winnings. So it's why the sponsors are important.
Sure.
If without the sponsors, I couldn't be here. I'll be honest with you, because I don't have another business that I can offset the cost with. And I believe that at this level, there is people offsetting their cost with either money that, they've, and not saying nothing bad, because we need money,
Right.
we need cars in this sport. I'm not saying anything bad with it, but how it makes it hard for people to come into the sport. I told someone not long ago, I said, 5 years from now, this is all going to look different, because I think we're going to have a hard time getting enough cars. And the last few weeks, I'm backing that up. It may not be 5 years, because what the car counts were compared to what they would have been, say, 5 years ago at the tracks you were at, Gordy. There would have been a lot more cars there 5 years ago. And I swear we're headed down a path that someday we're going to wake up and everybody's going to say, what happened? Well, I think we've made the sport too hard, scared people away, technology this, technology that. I kind of cringe when I hear it, because I'm thinking that just drives people away. It don't drive the people away that has the money, because they're willing to buy it, but it drives the people away that want to be here that don't have the money. So they go do something else, and instead of 26 or 27 cars at 34, we should be 40 cars, 45 cars at 34. But,
I took some friends to a NASCAR race a couple weeks ago, and we got to go up there, and they didn't know really anything about racing. One of my buddies did, but they asked me, they said, well, what would it cost to start a team to go do what you do? And I said, you wouldn't want to know. I said, if you had to start from bone dry and buy a truck and trailer and 2 race cars and 3 motors and all the spares, I said, you wouldn't be able to do it. The average person could not afford it. Even just to go buy a chassis from you and buy a motor and a smaller trailer right now and do those things to be competitive at a national level, that number is absolutely outrageous. And it, like you said, it has just continued to grow because of the technology, right? The shocks you have to buy, the information you almost have to pay for now just to get yourself
you
up
know,
to.
you know how much information I give away?
I couldn't imagine.
All of it.
Yeah.
I never ever charged anybody, and I would never charge them, because I feel like that's something that comes with the car. And when you add an extortion fee onto that car for information, you're doing a disjustice to them customers. And, look, it's a different world, but the problem's going to be, we're going to wake up and say, what happened?
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I've told a lot of people that. Obviously, you saying it makes me feel better about saying that we're trending towards the NASCAR style, and that is not the correct way to go.
Your dad
Nope.
called this.
But what's the answer? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you could fix it right now. I really don't.
Yeah.
Gordy's dad, I remember having the conversation with Kevin. And I remember when he saw the car counts on Friday night starting, and he said, this is just the start of it. And I was like, really? And he was like, I'm telling you, you're about to see this. And that is so funny that while this conversation's been going on, I almost wish Kevin was here, because he saw it just like you did, Mark. He saw this. He saw where this was going.
And it wasn't the right direction.
I seen it coming about 20 years ago, and that's when the streaming started. 18 years ago is when the streaming started, and I had a racetrack up until 2004, and we made we basically sold out of the racetrack business because I seen it coming. And we opened that racetrack in 1990. We took over, I should say. It was open. We took it over in 1990. And we were getting 3,000 people a week, 2,500. And over time, it was dwindling. And at the end, we were still getting 12 to 1,500, but that wasn't, that wasn't what it was. And prices back then were $8 for a general admission ticket, $20 to get in the pits. It wasn't like it was a lot of money. Where today everybody wants more money for pay, but I don't think the promoters can do more money because they can't raise the ticket prices up any more than what they are to bring in more money, because they're going to run more people away, because people say, I'll just watch it on streaming or stay home and watch something else on streaming. I mean, there's plenty of races on streaming, man. It's just, the local promoter's the one that's taking the beating. And he's taking the beating because people stay home. And there's enough racing that you can get your fix in a weekend, or now, like the Summer Nationals, it's on, the whole time, every bit of it. I mean, a guy's got to go to work the next day. He doesn't feel like driving an hour or two to a racetrack and setting out. And if the promoter don't run a smooth show, he might be not home until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and then have to get up and go to work the next day. I mean, it's way easier to watch it on streaming. So I feel bad for the promoters. I mean, I don't know what we can do about that either. I mean, I think that it's just an evolution that I don't think we're going to stop.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have any sort of slowdown coming. It just seems to be more. We race more. We think that's going to fix it all. That doesn't fix it. I think that makes it worse. And you spend more as a team owner. You spend more when you do got to race more. You got to have another motor or two or whatever, and then you got to send your motors back sooner. And it just.
Well, that's the problem. That's where the cost has come in. Right now you can figure, depending on what your rebuild's costing you, but $15 to $25 a lap for an engine rebuild. And the tire deals, there is no tire deals. Nobody's on a tire deal. Everybody's paying more than we've ever paid for tires. And, back in the day, I feel like Hoosier did a good job of helping the upper end of the sport put on races, because they were involved into the sponsorship part of it, where now Hoosier doesn't, do much with that. The help, the cost for the help, there's just all kinds of costs. But if you take, and I put this number out there, we're over 700,000 for a budget for the year. And if that's 100 nights, that's 7,000 a night. So you think about that, 7,000 a night before I break even, which means that I'd have to win 14,000 a night. So think about the guys that are out there that's not winning that kind of money. Their budget may not be what mine is because, of my help and the way I do my engines and all that stuff. It's just getting to where, racing more is not the answer. That's not the answer, because my expenses would be less if I didn't race as much, for the year. So, if I race 70 times a year, my budget would be probably a couple of 100,000 less than that. So that's where we are.
Yeah. But and where you guys are at, you can't afford not to race when there's races, because you take
we got to race. We got to race when there's races. And, there's the drivers are, obviously they get their percentage off the top, and there's not many drivers that are car owners anymore at this level. The car owners are the ones that, I feel like are getting to be a dying breed, or I shouldn't say a dying breed, but a going away breed, that there's not many of them coming into the sport.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to justify it. Why would you just want to pretty much sign yourself up to take a loss? It's
like I said, if it wasn't for sponsors, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all my sponsors.
Speaking of that, we always have the drivers talk about the sponsors.
Yeah.
I think, Mark, go ahead. You want to take some time and thank some of the people that make it possible for you? Floor is yours.
Definitely Valvoline. Valvoline's been a partner with me since, I'm going to say 20 plus years. And they've been a great partner, and, it's been a great relationship with them because, they wanted to be on board with a presence that was kind of professional, and not saying that in a bad way, but that was what they were looking for at the time. They've been on board. Seabird Calf Ranches, Mike Seibert, he's been an incredible sponsor. He called me back in 2004, and he asked me if I had any cars that needed sponsorship, and I said, yeah, mine. And he said, well, I was hoping you would say that. And he's been with me since 2004. So you think about that. That's awesome. 20 plus years that he's been there. Ed Petrov's been a great friend of mine over the years. Ed's always been on board, to help us out, whatever we need. There's a name on the car that a lot of people don't really see or understand. Ace Metalworks. That guy's been with me since Josh started racing in 2004. He's a local guy there that had a successful welding business, and he come over one day and he said, I want to help your kid. And his name's been on there every year. And, some of the newer sponsors, which Gunner's Honey's been with me for a number of years. He runs a really big honey company. You can look it up. It's called Gunner's Honey, and they sell all over the world, Japan, everywhere. And he's a really successful guy. He owns Winchester Speedway over in Virginia, but his main business is Gunter's Honey. He's been a great sponsor throughout the years. Performance Grading, which came on board a few years ago with us. And he's actually one of the guys that's involved with where we're going to race tomorrow night at Shelby County Speedway. And Gary's done a great job with that place over there. And he was sponsoring us, and he said, hey, what do you think about trying to get a Lucas race here? So I came over here and practiced one night, and the place was great. And I told Rick, I said, look, man, you need to be getting on it, because that town is behind it. The town actually, for Shelby County tomorrow night, they brought packages. I don't know if you got one, or Gordy or not.
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah.
There was packages with checks in them from local businesses that you could spend those checks in that town with local businesses in Shelby County. And there was a gift card in there from Fairway Food. It was just a package that, not promoters just don't go out and do stuff like that, and I think it was two $50 checks in there, to spend money in that county. Gary's been, like I said, he's been great with us. Billy Franklin Enterprises. Billy's been awesome for us. He's wanted to be involved for a number of years, but he had that team going on with Chris. And whenever that changed, he come on board and he said, look, I'm going to be on board to help you out. And Sammy Styles Marina, Sammy used to drive, and he won a lot of races in that Pittsburgh region over there. And he just got out of the racing part of it, and his business took off, and he does maintenance on tugboats and barges and stuff like that on the Ohio River, and he's got an incredible business over there. But if I've missed anybody, I'm totally, I'm caught off guard here
surprise you a little bit there,
because I'm not really the sponsor, the guru, but Andy Durham from Durham Engines, he's been on board with us as a partner, and Andy's a big part of our program here, and helps keep us on the ground, on track racing, and keeping fresh bullets sitting around for us. But all the sponsors, all the products people that have been sponsored us for the years, I couldn't do it without them. It's just that simple. I mean, I couldn't. I wouldn't do it if I didn't have support, because we don't make enough. Like, don't get me wrong, we have a pretty successful business, but we don't make that kind of money to where you can just go out and race a team like this the way we do it. I mean, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it fairly much at the level that it has to be to compete, and that takes a lot of support to do it.
Yeah, and the other thing, if we don't mention your partner Steve, he'll probably call me up and scream and kill me. There's nobody like Baker, dude. He's gold.
If it wasn't for Steve Baker, I wouldn't be sitting here in Council Bluff, Iowa right now, getting ready to race tomorrow, because he's ran that business since 1986. We ran it together for a number of years, and when I started getting out and getting on the road racing, I mean, he has stayed there and kept it intact. And the other guy that has been there the whole time with us is Scott Perkey. He's the one that's welded all these cars up. And, when I need something, that guy builds it. And we built a new car in 3 days, 2 weeks ago. This car that Brandon's driving, I came in after Lernerville, and I told Scott some ideas that I had that I felt like we wanted to change. And there's all kinds of people out there that says it's a rock horn, it's copied Longhorn. We ain't copied nothing. I came in and we made our changes of what we felt like we needed to build for a car. And look, there's been a lot of people's copied a lot of people in this business. And I can say that that's not what this car is, contrary to what people out there want to talk about. If somebody ever wants to come and look at it, they're welcome to come and look at it. I'm pretty sure it doesn't look anything like our competition. So with that being said, Scott Perkey is the guy that has welded on 6,500 cars since we started. He's been with me since 1988. And every car that we built at Rocket, he has welded on.
Mark, I can tell you that there's nobody, Gordy and I talk about this all the time, and anybody that knows anything about dirt late model racing knows Mark Richards is going to figure it out, and that's just the way it is, man. It's just racing in dirt late model world. Mark Richards is never going to back down from a fight, and we have nothing but respect for you. I can tell you that. I mean, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on tonight, I mean, first of all, your driver stood us up. He chose the zoo. He chose the fucking zoo over us. But that's okay.
Yeah, he's got the kids, and supposedly this is the best zoo in the country here in Omaha. So
it better be.
He had a chance to take the kids there today, and that's where he's at.
Yeah. And he's been texting us saying, I'm sorry and all that. We're like, it's all good. The way I look at it, man, we were going to have you on the show sometime anyway, and you're going to be on here multiple times. And I can't thank you enough for coming on for Gordy and I, because we have so much respect for you.
Well, I appreciate it. I got respect for you guys.
I've known you forever, man. I've slept a lot of nights in those trucks with you, man. I can't thank you for everything you've done for me.
Well, No problem. I appreciate you guys having us on.
Matter of fact, I got something we don't even have on the table tonight.
Oh, yeah. What is wrong with us? Jesus. You'll like this. Wait, hold on. We got to grab this. Yeah, you're definitely going to like this one. Really screwed the pooch here there, Don.
This goes with me everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
You know that. I love that kid.
Yeah.
I love that kid. I always will. I still have the personal note and everything. And I still remember a story. Mark was gone. We were at the World 100. Mark took off after qualifying on Friday night. And it was me, Josh, and Joe in the truck. And Josh went quick time at the World. And we were so happy. And anybody that knows Josh doesn't drink anything I don't drink or whatever. And Joe, we're all in there sipping on Gatorades. Mark's gone. Nobody. It's just the three of us. And because we were so pumped up with Josh, I'll never forget it. Joe hit that air horn all night, letting everybody in the pit area know that the kid had arrived. It was pretty awesome.
That had to be Paxton.
Oh, yeah, it was.
You know, he still works for me.
But it was still one of the greatest things. Here's Josh is in there saying, Dad's going to get back in the morning. He's going to have my rear end. You know, you guys better cut out all the noise in the pit area, because it wasn't like that style. But yeah, we just were all so excited. But we're proud of that.
Yeah, that was a different era as well, and it was probably, you know, my highlight to race with my kid, and
absolutely,
you know, things kind of got going all different directions with the NASCAR thing when he was down there trying to do that and the dirt racing. And, you know, what happens to guys that, and it doesn't matter what kind of sport it is, whether it's baseball, football, whatever it is, life changes once you become successful. And, you know, it ain't like it was whenever, you know, you were trying to get there, and, you know, life changed. So I miss those days, but it is what it is.
It's pretty awesome.
Well, obviously we appreciate you coming on here. I know I enjoy the hell out of going up and down the road and racing with you guys, and you know, it's always been fun for me. You know, over the years, I feel like we've got to know each other a little bit better, just racing more, and you know, I've enjoyed that a lot. You know, it's
well, the sad thing is I'm old enough to remember when your dad was your age. And yet maybe younger. He was probably younger, and we ran up and down the road with Kevin all the time. And the first time I really met your dad, and I can remember it because it was the first time I met Billy Moyer, and it was in 81, and we were at Davenport for a day race, and Rodney won the race that day, and it was a 2-day show, and we were there, and that's when I met Kevin, and that was the first time I seen Billy Moyer, and we ended up staying out there, and we went to Cedar Rapids the next week, and we won up there as well, and I had to change motors right before the feature at Davenport. I could remember it plain as day. There was no lights. They raced in the daytime. And we hung out with your dad and Billy, and that was it was a different time back then. And, you know, I enjoyed running up down the road with your dad. Your dad was a character, I will tell you that. I remember one time I was following him, and he ran back and grabbed the keys. So I was sitting there in the truck, and we had trailers. Obviously, they were like cube vans, and he pulled my truck in park and grabbed my keys and took off at a stoplight. I can remember that plain as day. So
Yeah, it sounds about right. I've got to hear a lot of them good stories over the years of him being out of control, and it's where I'm sure it's where I get a lot of it from. Of
He was a character. Kevin was back in those days when he was probably younger than you.
Yeah.
So
I believe it. I absolutely believe it. Well, yeah, it's he's still a kid at heart. I mean, everybody knows if you're at Tri-City and he's in the water truck, you better be at least 200 foot back from the racetrack because he'll hit you with the sprayer as he goes by.
oh yeah.
So
No,
awesome. Well,
but I appreciate you guys having this on, and
yeah.
we'll see what
Best
happens.
of luck to you this week. You got some big money ahead of you. You got 25,000. Tomorrow? Then you go to Eustis and you got a 10, 10, and a 75, and you're hot right now. So
We'll see what happens.
yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. Mark, thanks again for coming on with us.
Yep. Thanks, Mark.
appreciate
Okay.
See you at the PDC.
No problem, guys. See you then.
buddy.
All right. Bye-bye.